Hello and welcome. Soldiers sent into conflict zones far from home may face many challenges, but what about when the enemy is far closer to home in terms of language, religion and culture? That's only one of the dilemmas facing Arab American soldiers serving in Iraq, in a war that's already unpopular with so many people around the world, including their own communities back home. Well, today we look at the efforts of one US Marine who's working to bring attention to the contributions of Arab Americans in the military and ask where should the loyalties lie for Arab American soldiers. Don't forget, we take your questions via phone and mobile text. The numbers are there on your screen. And joining me for the discussion is Jamal Badani, who's the first sergeant in the US Marine Corps Reserve, who enlisted at the age of 17. The young Jamal soon found himself in Beirut just days after the 1983 bombing of the US Marine barracks there. Well, following the terrorist attacks of September the 11th in the US and the backlash against his own family, Jamal founded the Association of Patriotic Arab Americans in the Military. APAM is an organization dedicated to bringing greater attention to the military services of Arab Americans. Jamal, it's great to speak with you.
Good to be here, Riz. Thanks for having me.
I guess for our viewers, we should get a little history and just find out what made you join the Marines in the first place. What made you take that career path?
I think it was my upbringing in Egypt. I was born and raised in Cairo, Egypt, in the early 60s, and also in Yemen when they were going through the civil war in '66 that we talked earlier. Yeah, and it made me interested in the military. I used to always see soldiers and their tanks and marching down the street, and also I grew up in Cairo during the 6 October War between Egypt and Israel. So it was something that always attracted me, but the most important reason why I joined was to give back to America and thanking America for giving us a place to call home. And I really didn't think that I could be a first-class citizen, because I was always discriminated against growing up, and didn't think and treated like a second-class citizen. I joined the military so I could feel like I was a first-class citizen.
Was it a way it was to sort of justify that you were as good as anyone else? It was
yes, yeah, that's true.
How did your family react when you joined the military? When you decided to to take this path?
Well, my father raised me to be a lawyer, doctor, engineer. It seems like every Arab father wants that. But as you know, people grow up pursuing their own dreams, and mine, since I was a child, was to be in the military. I mean, I was 10 years old when I immigrated to the U.S. I remember a local paper came to cover me in Lapeer, Michigan, and they were interested by how I was drawing war scenes at 10. They said, wow, this kid's, something's wrong with him.
Well,
in a good way.
Growing up in the conflict in Yemen as a child, the same thing. I was interested in guns and military and everything for the longest time. But yeah. What happened to you was you actually went into the Marines at the age of 17, sent off to Beirut just at the time that the bombings took place there in '83 of the barracks. Yes. How did that affect you?
It was, when I was on the way there, I remember this because it's something that was new in my life, a shock in my life. Something interesting, and things that we've been trained in boot camp in the Marine Corps. So I was ready to go and do what the Marines taught me to do. And I remember coming off the USS Guam, which is a US Navy ship, on a helicopter. We're going about 100 feet off the water and coming in towards Beirut. And from far away, Beirut looked like this white tourist city, and I thought it was really, wow, I'm going to Lebanon. And as we got closer, we started seeing smoke, started seeing buildings with holes. And then once we landed and realized, wow, this is definitely a city in a civil war. And I got mixed emotions as the time went on and the time that I spent there.
Did you, in the military, did you ever face any of the kind of discrimination or alienation that, for example, many African American soldiers talk about?
I can speak about the broad group, Arab Americans in the military. We've all experienced it. I mean, not to the extent that we see it outside of the military, because in the military you're taught to respect one another and work together, and your lives depend on one another. But there are those instances, and I'm not, can't say that it's 100% no, we haven't, but we all experience this somehow or another, because the military, at the end of the day, is a reflection of the community, and there are those who bring those sentiments from their community into the military, but it's not as profound as what you find in the American communities.
Well, let's get a call in. We've got Mohammed on the line from Austria. Mohammed, good to hear from you. What would you like to ask?
Yeah, hi Riz. I wanted to ask, I can understand if you're a Muslim and a soldier and fighting in Iraq, but how do you feel like as a Muslim fighting in Iraq and killing a fellow Muslim when it's an unjust war?
Okay. Thanks very much, Mohammed. The question you've been asked a number of times, I'm sure.
You know, I want to preface that first by saying that in the history of America, and it's really important for Americans to know and Arab Americans to know and Muslims to know, that Muslims and Arab Americans have been fighting for this country since before the Revolutionary War. There's documented names. For example, Private Nathan Badin died on May 23rd, 1776, and there were 5 others, Muslims, who died in the Revolutionary War, establishing the foundation of the freedom for America. And there were 5,300 Muslims who served in the Civil War for the Union.
Right, and there's about 15,000, I think, in World War II.
15,000 in World War II, and there's currently 3,500 Arab Americans serving in the military and over 6,000 Muslims serving in the military. Now, he asked a question, you know, how does a Muslim feel about killing other Muslims? If you call Al-Qaeda, you know, and terrorists Muslim, then there's something wrong with that, because the Islam that I was raised in taught me not to kill innocent people, you know, not to take another life. And so if that's his definition of Islam, then that's not the Islam that I grew up with.
I think a lot of people became skeptical, though, once they saw some of the things that were happening, you know, soldiers being tried for rape and murder in places like Iraq, after they saw Abu Ghraib and places like that. So when you have to answer questions like that, how do you handle it? How do you justify that?
You know, that appalls me when I see soldiers in the U.S. military do crimes against humanity and crimes against people. And what that says is, like I said earlier, the military is a reflection of society, you know, and it's not perfect. You're going to have people with criminal, you know, they don't know if, you know, they're committing crimes, but they get in a situation and they commit a crime, and that's appalling. And it's sad that it happens. But in the greater picture, we are taught to be peacekeepers. We are taught to take care of and respect the people that we're serving in. For example, Iraq or the Horn of Africa, where I was, we've done so much good for the people of those countries by renovating schools, helping people, feeding the children. You know, we're taught to do good things, but yes, there are those few who do crimes, as you said, and that's appalling.
I want to put an email question to you that came from Dublin in Ireland, and Joe Gantley says, an Arab defending Muslim culture against the Taliban is not only acceptable, it is essential. A Christian defending Europe against a true Muslim culture is not acceptable because it's not a threat. It does seem that the US actions in Iraq are not a just war, so Arabs, Christians and Buddhists in the US military have to ask themselves some hard questions. Now, I put that in the context of, we talked about a couple of examples of incidents that took place in Iraq, for example. But what about when you have to look at the bigger picture and people ask the question about, should we have gone into Iraq in the first place, meaning the US? You know, has the US public, the people of the United States been misled by a government that says this is a war that was justified, and a lot of people think it wasn't? So when you think about the bigger picture, how do you react?
Well, America is a free society, and I tell everyone, your voice has to be heard in the voting booth through lobbying your congressmen and senators. Where was America when we went into Iraq? That's a question they have to ask, so those who are posing those questions. Where were they asking those same questions? We were ready to go in. Why didn't they yell loud enough if they felt that it was something that they disagreed with?
Do you think the voice of the people is heard, though, in the voting process now? I mean, the way, you know, lobbying power of big companies and so on is...
Well, what happened in the last November election is what we saw is the House of Representatives and the Senate was changed from Republican control to Democratic control because of the main issue, the war in Iraq. So it is working. And people have to, if they feel against the Iraq war, against anything else in this world or domestic issues, they have to stand up and speak up. And that's the most important way for them to be heard.
Jamal, we've got Ali on the line from Detroit. Ali, what would you like to ask?
I would like to ask if he has a responsibility to America or to him being an Arab Muslim.
Sorry, I didn't catch all of that. Did you catch that?
Yeah, you said, do I have a responsibility to be American or something else?
Do you have a responsibility to being an American or to being a Muslim?
Oh, yeah, which responsibility comes first? And that's true. Where do the loyalties lie? Is it to your faith, to your country?
You know, first of all, I'm a Muslim, and no one can tell me how to be a Muslim. That's between me and Allah, and Ali can probably support me on that. But our faith and what America gives us is a right to practice our religion freely. And I think that's why Ali's here in America, and that's why I'm an American, and why my dad brought us here to America, is to practice our religion freely. So yes, I am American, and I'm a Muslim, and I'm proud of it. And I'm so glad that I'm in a country that allows me to practice it freely, because Ali wouldn't be in America if he couldn't practice religion freely. He'd be somewhere else.
Well, let me ask you about what happened after September the 11th. Of course, it was a huge time of reflection for the Arab American community and so on. There was a lot of bad feeling and divisions in the country. You took the step of setting up APAM.
Yes.
Let me ask you, first of all, how effective that has been and what results you've seen from that.
Our goal for APAM was to stand up for the Arab American community and the Muslim community. So we got a lot of respect and a lot of support for that, because when 9/11 happened and Americans were killing our people and they were discriminating against us, you got to remember, we grieved for America, for being hit, for our fellow Americans, but not even a couple hours later we were grieving for our own who were being killed at the hands of racism and bigots. And we stood up for them to say to the Americans and those bigots, leave our people alone, leave us alone. We're Americans just like you, and here's who we are. And the patriotism and our service that is conveyed by that patriotism is directly reflective on our community where we come from, and they are patriots, just like our callers and just like Ali, who just asked, am I American or am I Muslim? And I'm saying I'm both, and we're patriotic.
Tell me, there were a couple of interesting stories that came out of that time post September the 11th. Your uncle asking for a photograph of you in your full military gear so he could actually stave off criticism in his workplace where he was being targeted by people he'd worked with for years.
Yeah, you know, even us in the uniform, we're touched by racism here in America through family, through our own children, through our own example. I mean, I was subject to many incidents, and my uncle, he's been working for this company now for over 35 years, and 9/11 was right about 30 years. And he was a foreman. He was responsible for about 28 people. They all turned their back on him and went to his boss and said, we don't want to work for that terrorist. And he called me just really, really sad and said, can you please FedEx me a picture of me in uniform so I can prove my patriotism to these people so they don't look at me as a terrorist. And that's where the strength of APAM is, to help people like the callers and like Ali in Detroit, that when he's being discriminated against, we're standing up for his rights and for him to tell America, leave Ali alone, we're patriots, and he's a patriot.
And it made a difference for you.
It sure does, to this day.
Yeah. And even I think your daughter at the time was young, she was at school, had the same things of questions asked.
Yeah, and you know what, and it was the first time in her life, she was 14 at the time, and it was the first time in her life that her patriotism or her identity was ever questioned. And she was made to feel different that day, because ironically my daughter has blonde hair and blue eyes.
Well, you know, it's interesting that we have on our team here at Al Jazeera Josh Rushing, a former Marine, who I think you're actually friends with, and you did, weren't you involved in some sort of, you recruited him into the Marines? I
recruited him into the Marine Corps long before there was 9/11 and long before there was any racial issues or anything. I was, you know, Sergeant Badani, the Marine, and he was Josh Rushing, the high school student, and he came into my office and I recruited him.
Now, you were out there actually as someone trying to pull people in. How difficult was it to persuade them to join the military?
At the time, in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was recruiting, we had Vietnam. You know, we just got over Vietnam, and a lot of the parents grew up in the Vietnam era, and it was very difficult. I mean, you had to call those parents who were anti-war and you know, anti-Vietnam, and that's what we dealt with. And it's no different today, because now we're in a different part of the world. And incidentally, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, we're going to be in other parts of the world. So it might be right now the Arab American community. Who knows what it's going to be down the road.
Of course, Josh faced a lot of criticism, and you know, was very brave standing up for his decision to speak out as well. But always says that with the Marines, you know, once a Marine, always a Marine, and the motto being "do the right thing for the right reason." So,
that's right.
At what point, I mean, should a soldier, should someone question their mission, their orders, their superiors, if they feel that they're being asked to do something that isn't right?
Unfortunately, when we joined the military, we signed a contract that we swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. We serve the people, not the government. So that's very important. But we're obligated to follow orders. Just recently, there was a young man who got out of the active duty to inactive reserve status and decided to go protest the war. he was taken up on charges, even though he was off of active duty. And they took away his honorable discharge and gave him a general discharge. And that probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people who don't understand the difference, but the difference is he can now not get a federal job. He can't apply for VA benefits. He has to pay back his loans. So if people do decide to do something like that, we pay a heavy price. And again, we join, we serve, and what our community looks for us to do is honor our contract and honor our commitment.
So irrespective of whether the general public agrees with what the military is doing in a place like Iraq, ultimately you are committed to your job, and you have that commitment and that contract, as you say. How do you feel about the increased use of the private military companies, the paramilitaries that are brought in, and contractors, private military contractors that are used by the government in places like Iraq? When they do something and they're sort of relatively outside the law, it comes back onto people like yourself who have a code.
That I really can't answer. I don't know the details of how they fit in the big picture, because I go in as a Marine and we do our job as a Marine. We've been supported by contractors for certain jobs like communications or logistics or truck drivers, because there's just not enough military people to do the job. So that's my experience with it. But I can tell you what the military has done for me. It's helped me get a college education. It's helped take care of my family. I retire in a couple of years. I'll be retired, and it's been my career.
You look too young to retire either way, Jamal. Great speaking with you. So many questions and not enough time. I hope to get you back.
Thank you, Riz. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. Well, thanks for being with us. On tomorrow's show, we take a look into the life of one of the world's most notorious international arms smugglers, Victor Bout, who with an author and investigative journalist, Douglas Farrer. Don't forget, if you have any questions for our guest or thoughts about pressing issues around the world, send emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is coming up next.